What's up, guys? This idea has been in the making for so long, and I think so. Today I was actually sitting at work, and I was just thinking what should we start as the beginning of our podcast, right?
Mm-hmm.
And um, and I just thought about it. It being the culmination of everything that has happened in our life in terms of reflecting the growth, right? Because the podcast is gonna be elevate. So elevate to grow to a higher status, right? So I think that's a good idea to start off with, the idea of just reflecting the growth within our life,
Yeah, just reflecting our own experiences.
our own experiences. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good idea.
yeah, and then so because the culmination comes with the part where just everything else, like everything entail, because it's gonna be, it could be business wise, because business, it could be philosophical growth, it could be psychological growth.
Yeah, we could touch on different aspect of things and just different areas that we learn, as well as learning from other people.
Mm-hmm.
That's also important.
Yeah. So remember last time we were talking about storyline. Actually, I wanna go into that, in terms of telling the story. So what made you want to initiate this podcast? Because I know you thought about this long time.
Yeah. When I thought about it first, I would say my mind was more so on the religious aspect of things and just wanting to share the word of God. But I also believe that having conversation is important, and how we help each other and better improve each other's lives is by having conversations, authentic conversation that is rid of filters
Mm-hmm.
and not amplified by media or anything, just as human being coming together and having a real and authentic conversation. That's really important because we are beings that learn from each other. And I think in our society, a lot of times the social aspect of it has been eliminated, if not doubled down. So we want to have that. We want to have more conversation, especially.
Yeah, like opening up and having that conversation. So
Yeah.
first thing first, my name is Justin. I will be going by Justin, and
Hey guys, I'm Celestina. I go by Celestina or Tina.
I like to call her Tina. And we're gonna have a lot of people. We got so many things in store. It's not just gonna be me and
Yeah.
Tina. It's gonna be Ben. It's gonna be everybody. It's just gonna try to bring as many people as we can, and then just having that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I wanted to ask in terms of the storyline, um, like what aspect of your life do you think you can tells us or tell the people um that will be able to say, okay, this is kind of define the entire narrative of my life, or to be in an articulate way.
Yeah. I think I learn as I go. I learn as I grow, and so just me sharing my day-to-day life as well as my past experiences
Mm-hmm.
and just the things that I've been able to learn over the years is really important, and also the things that I don't learn from, because a lot of times whenever you begin to say certain things and you reflect on it, you go back to that situation, you're like, okay, I need to improve myself and I need to become better because I have to live by what I preach.
Mm-hmm.
And so that aspect of me is what I want to share, just the things that I've lived through, the things that I'm living through, and the things that I want to become, because you also want to have a destination as well. So definitely that's one I want to share. What do you want to share?
What I want to share,
Yeah.
I think it's more in the sense of reflecting the growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's I want to also captivate, and I want to also capture the mistakes, right?
Mistakes.
So because most of the time we learn from our mistakes. I was listening to someone the other day, and they were talking about how your memory's primary job is not to dwell on the past, but it is to continuously learn from it so that you can impact the future in a positive way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what this platform is gonna be about, is people who are constantly growing, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are constantly growing, we are constantly learning new things, and reflecting that to the world in a way that say, hey, we are messing up here, we are also growing as well.
Yeah. Would you feel comfortable sharing something that you're going through, like learning from your mistake, but you're actually going through that thing in real time?
Well, it depends. It depends on the level of it. Because like for me, I feel like I don't like sharing things, right?
Yeah.
If I'm going through it and I haven't got the answer to it,
I mean,
or haven't come to a resolution.
there are also times where you can share something to sort of have a connection with other people and say, hey, I'm also going through that thing. And I might not have already come to the solution, but the process in itself has taught me so many things. And so I think you can share an aspect of that. Maybe not the whole picture, but just a portion of what you've learned and the fact that you're still dealing with the same situation, but you've accumulated certain knowledge and wisdom to help you cope with that issue.
Yeah, that has a way of impacting the people
Yeah.
in positive way, and also has it's effective, right? Because you are going through it and you're trying to find out the solution. So I want to ask you this question because I just thought about it. Like, what do you think is the primarily job of a motivator? Because I feel like a lot of people that we follow or we listen to normally tell us stories that are complete, right? By saying, hey, I used to have this type of addiction, I overcome it. You know, they don't tell us, they don't share what is currently going on until years later we just find out, hey, he was going through something.
Yeah. I think the important part of it, especially from someone who's being motivated, is my ability to identify with whatever it is the person is saying. So if you're motivating me on something or an issue that I'm dealing with, I need to be able to identify with that issue. And part of an inspirational speaker, in order for them to do that, they kind of have to connect with their speaker, their audience. And so I think that's like really the crucial aspect of it, being able to connect to your audience. You might be going through that thing, but like you can connect your audience with enthusiasm as well as motivation and inspiration. I think those are leadership attributes that you can go through those emotions and face those situations that are not necessarily good and still go up to the other person and be able to build them as you climb. So I think that's really that big aspect of inspiration, because we're not always complete. We're not always perfect. There are times I can tell you, I can motivate you and I'm going through the same thing, but I have the courage to build you up as I also climb, and we learn from each other.
We learn from each other.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting is that now it's pretty much easier and difficult, mainly because of social media, right? It's like you can see someone else's life, right? Because like social media is there to magnify things that are happening in people's life, so you can see someone's life in part and you think that's how their life is, right? And then you try to mirror the same thing that you see on social media into your life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's the danger, because we want to identify with people, but at the same time, when you only magnify the good, especially on Instagram, I would say that's the app where everybody's goodness is sort of amplified and magnified, and it's very hard to see the flaws. And instead, we begin to project our insecurities on people instead of identifying with some of the struggles they may face. Because in order for me to get to step B or to become such a great person, I need to be able to know the strategy. And if I see a complete picture but I'm not given a procedure, then it makes it so much more difficult, and it makes it seem like there's an abstraction where I can never reach that, because like there's no connect.
There's no connection.
There's no connection. And so I think that aspect has definitely been a problem in social media. We're not really shown that raw version. But we also have the extreme, like TikTok, where we show our most raw version, where it's like now there's no need to amplify yourself. It's like you need to accept me for who I am, with my bad and my good, but mostly the baggage. So we don't want to work and fix the things that are wrong with us, but rather we want to amplify them and get sympathy, which is great, but you need to have sympathy so you can improve, not to stay and dwell on that situation. Yeah.
Interesting. It's like with TikToks, you say like in terms of like people constantly showing the bags, right? The bad things that is going on, right? It's like, okay, this is something that I'm dealing with. How do I fix it? Or is it more like, because I don't have TikTok, so it's like, is it more like I have something that is going on that I want to fix, or is it something like it's something that just
it's
accept
more
it?
it's more relatable. Like
Okay.
if I'm seeing someone who's going through a devastating situation and it's like, oh, I can relate to that. There's no incentive to improve or motive to become better. It's just the fact that we can relate. And when you make content off of something that is not necessarily benefiting you physically or mentally or vice versa, anything. And it's like you constantly have to put yourself in a bad light so people can connect to you, because the extreme is Instagram, where we project the goodness of things, we project the perfect things, and then we have a different platform where you project the worst of things, and it's like, at least I can relate to somebody. At least I can find somebody who's also dealing with the problem,
Yeah.
instead of seeing this abstraction of image of a person that I just cannot relate to totally. So that's
That's kind of like the extreme part of it.
the extreme.
Do you think like, okay, do you think, because like you're young, right?
Yeah.
So do you think in general social media has very much like give us some ideology that are very abstract to our reality, or do you experience the same thing that you constantly see on social media in your real life?
It's definitely an abstraction, because social media, like I said, it magnifies a lot of things. So you can have an idea, and let's say it can be a political idea, and that thing will be amplified all over social media as if that's real life, when really it's not. Like if I go out to the grocery store, that thing is not going to happen to me, whereas social media is going to be telling me the world is coming to an end because this and this and that, but that's really not the case. So there's this big abstraction. It's not that those problems that we see on social media are not existing, it's just they're amplified. Like when you take the minority and you magnify it, as a population, we look at it with fear, thinking that, oh, that's actually what's happening, but that's really not the case. So disassociating from social media and the real life is important, because a lot of times we have teens who experience anxiety because we're afraid of something that is just really non-existent,
Non-existent.
or something that the chances of facing it is extremely slim. So
Yeah. But now it's like social media has become part of our life. So
yeah.
now the question elevates from, well, we can't just avoid it, right? Because when it came out and we saw like suicide rates going up and all this stuff, we started first like neglecting and said, okay, we have to like disregard it or throw it away. But now it's like, no, this is gonna be part of our life.
Yeah.
It's here to stay.
Yeah.
How do we cope with it? How do we deal with it? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's the elevate part of it, where we have grown to that level where it's like, okay, it's never gonna go away. So how do we deal with it?
Yeah, it's like AI, because I think our professors still have expectations that they had, let's say, 2 to 5 years ago. And when I see my professors and they're telling us all these things about academic honesty, and yes, I agree, but at the same time, we have so much more resources. And in the real world, if I were to get a job after college, I think the reality will be I'm going to be using AI. AI is going to be implemented in a lot of the things that I do at work. And so when we don't teach students to adapt to this new structure of the world, then it complicates things, because you have a standard that you want them to be at in order to get a certain grade. But how does that grade translate to real life and practicality as far as the job that they will get?
So and also like, how does that work, especially with ChatGPT? Like how school
Well,
work? Like I feel like that's kind of like, I mean, I didn't grow up with ChatGPT in college, but like, how does that work? How does the teacher like deal with that?
It makes things easier. Like it
For
gives
you, or
you,
for the teacher, or for the
for
professor?
us, and I think maybe for the teacher, but it's really hard to decipher who's using ChatGPT. But among the students, you can tell. You can tell
You
it
can tell.
because, like, if I try to use ChatGPT and I ask them a question and they answer, and then I look at the discussion board and everybody else has that similar answer or amplified answer, I know we all use
We are using
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT.
But yeah, it just it gives us resources.
Yeah.
It makes things a lot easier, and there are times where professors would give excessive amount of work and reading, and it's like, I don't have time for that. I have work and I have life, and I just don't have time to do that. And so we have the resources to have ChatGPT sort of like summarize those articles and books. And so it makes things a lot easier. But there is also that aspect of it that's dangerous, because sometimes if you allow the computer to think for you, then you lose room for critical thinking.
Yeah.
And the last thing we want is to become slaves of our bots. We don't want to be slaves of the very things that we created. And so we have to learn to control ourselves, as well as how do I control this thing? How do I know my limit? Because there are times where I would ask, I think I do have experiences with AI, and so I would ask certain questions that I'm concerned about or have just don't have the knowledge for it, and so it would tell me the answers. And so I have to make the decision, do I write down what it's telling me, or do I analyze what it's telling me and allow myself to critically think about what are my perspectives on this topic? Because it's giving me the information, but I have to be able to decipher what are my own views and what are just the abstract views of the text. And I think that's really important, and we can really lose that in society, especially when AI is just so big and there is no regulation whatsoever.
Okay, so critical thinking. That's
Yeah.
what you say.
Critical thinking.
Critical thinking. It's important. Very important. I had a professor, and they were big on like using technology. He was like, "Yeah, hey, listen, it's here to stay, so you gotta use it." And then, so they would give us assignments where it will be about things that will make us go and look for it, right? On Google, AI, all this stuff, right? So the part of critical thinking is like, it's gonna be difficult because now you're using something else to be able to help you in order for you to think properly, in order for you to articulate to what you're trying to tell to your professor, right? So I'm like, okay, how do you think about using AI or using what we have right now, the technology that we have, and also be able to think critically. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of complexities with that, because we don't know where the line is crossed with that. But I think it goes back to, I need to get the information about a specific thing, and once I get that information, then I need to decipher what are my own views. And
yeah, I mean, the part of where you go and get information is important, because one of my professors used to say, if you can go and look for the information, I'll count that as a grade.
Yeah.
Because you are going and looking out for the information, but you're not necessarily thinking about the answer.
You're not
or
thinking about it.
Try to find the solutions within the problem. You're just copying and pasting it.
Yeah, I know that's the complexity of it, because you have to be able to, but I think it gives us a higher aim.
Yeah.
Because sometimes our professors can ask us the most basic of questions, and if I can have ChatGPT answer that, it gives me like the information, and so it allows for me to go to a higher level of thought. Whereas, okay, this is the answer. Why is that? How do I better understand it and also assess myself? But a lot of times we don't get there, because if the goal is to get the answer, then why should I go above and beyond that? Why should I critically sort of like think outside of the box?
Also, you cannot go to a higher aim if you have not yet meet the basic requirement.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like you can't learn algebra if you have not learned that 1 + 1 = 2 thing, the basic of it.
Yeah.
So it's like ChatGPT will give you the complexity of it, right? They will give you the answer, the complexity, but you don't know how to decipher the complexity within it. It's like when you're doing algebra homework, where the teacher will give you like you put the answer there, and then the teacher will take out like half the point because you didn't show the process.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of like in a similar sense.
Yeah.
Like you won't be able to think above the M that you have not fully walked through.
Yeah.
It's
like that understanding. So we're moving backwards where we have the solution and then we go back to how did you get to that solution?
Yeah.
And that's the intricate part of it.
I mean, I think that can be used to our advantage, right? Do you think that's possible?
It could, but we have to deliberately put that effort in to learn, because a lot of times it's very easy to dismiss and say, well, I have the answer, then I don't need to go back and look through my work and see the process. How did I get here? Actually get the understanding of it. Like, not many people do that, and that's the hard part of it, because you can get the answers and it can help you for your job or school or anything, but you need to have that level of understanding with that answer as well.
And now it's like, now you just have this, I would say, kind of like an existential questions about education in whole, because you're going to fall into that rabbit hole. It's like, okay, what's the need for education? What's all this? Because of how, like, all the informations are in our cell phone. Right? We have all the information that we need in our cell phone. All you got to do is just look it up. Right, the same information that your professor gonna give you is pretty much the same equivalent to what you can get online.
Yeah.
It's like, now it's like, what's the need for it? But then again, it's like, okay, you gotta get the paper and all this stuff. I don't know, like, what's your thoughts on that?
I also think like the real experience is something that you just can't emulate from AI. Like, you can't take that and copy it from AI, because the things that I learn through my professors, given that they're great and they're doing well at their job, then it's so much different from what I will learn from AI. And I think it's the nuances that we don't quite pay attention to, but those nuances that get us to that solution is sort of like the process is just as important as the end.
As the end, yeah.
So I think that like the means to the end is also just as important. And so when you get the solution and you don't have that process, it's kind of hard to be able to navigate yourself when you even have the solution. Because sometimes we think if I have the right answer, then I have the resources, but that's not always the case.
Yeah. Yeah, because like when you have the answers, without the applications of the answers, you won't be able to reach that. You won't be able to reach that goal.
Yeah, and the process teaches you the application.
Yeah, the process is what teaches you the application of it.
Yes.
So you're starting to learn how to process information on a different frequency. So I wanted to touch on one particular thing, because I feel like, this is how like we are seeing the world within our lenses. But at the same time, I wanted to discuss about communications, like the art of communication, the art of understanding one another, and be able to not necessarily like validate someone else's opinion, in terms of like, I will accept you for that opinion, but in order to understand it, like, you can have different thoughts, right? You can have different thoughts on a particular thing, and I can have my own thoughts on a particular thing, right? But how do we come to that communication? How do we establish a relationship to where we can have that genuine, communication between one another?
I think it's a lot like literature. When you want to understand a text, you have to empty yourself of the assumptions and all these filters that will lead you to one direction in order to understand the author's perspective. And so when we come and have conversations, we have to sort of like empty ourselves and be open to listen to the other opinion. Not necessarily that your opinion automatically becomes mine, but I'm able to validate your opinion in the sense that I recognize that it is real and it is yours, instead of invalidating it and just putting my own assumptions on you and kind of like interpreting whatever you say from my own lens rather than from your own lens.
So would you say validating someone else's opinion is equivalent to understanding someone else's opinion?
Yeah, I would say that. I think
Yeah.
like the term validation is something that different people define it differently. And a lot of times when you say validation, it can mean affirming your opinion, which I'm not necessarily affirming or agreeing. I'm just sort of like understanding where you're coming from. And I hear that it is your opinion. I'm validating the fact that it is yours, it is real, and that it exists, and that it's different from mine. But I still have that understanding. I don't necessarily agree with it or affirm it, but I just know that it's yours, and I'm okay with that.
You're okay with, yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people miss, especially when it comes to like, I mean, I don't want to go into politics, but especially when it comes to politics, especially here in the United States,
Yeah.
different ideology just crashes, and that clash of ideology results to the clash of relationship.
Yes. I
Like
mean,
I've heard stories of people divorcing because of different ideology. I mean, like we're different people.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. That's when we get down to the intricacy of free speech,
Yeah.
because everybody roots free speech. But when someone says something that offends you, it's so easy for you to get offended
Get
and want
offended,
to
yeah.
cancel them. But it's not that like whatever you say doesn't offend me. It does, but you have the right to say what it is that you're saying. And so I will validate what you're saying in the sense that it is yours, and in the sense that I understand, or I might not understand.
Yeah.
Like I might not understand your worldview because I have a different idea, but it doesn't mean that you're like I have to completely sort of like get so offended in the sense that I should take away your right to
Your
say
right
that
to
thing.
say that, yeah.
And like we have become so sensitive in the sense that you can't say something that offends me. Like I think Jordan Peterson said something that whenever you're critically thinking and you're having real conversation, you're risking offense. Like you're going to be offended, but you have to be a constructive individual in order to be able to take someone else's opinion without it hitting you personally,
Yeah.
because it's not always personal.
Yeah. And I think that's why I think he said something about like in order for you to critically think, you have to risk be offensive.
Yes, that's how he worded it.
Yeah. And I think me and Ben were like watching Cat Williams
Yeah.
and how he was like just saying outrageous stuff
yes.
outside on the pod. And I think this is what's interesting about the podcast, right? It's like people are now creating platforms within the podcast, right? That are allowing people to just speak about the most outrageous thoughts, because it's being censored. It's being like censored. Like speech is being censored, and due to speech being censored, people are finding an alternative way in order for them to express that, and people are watching it,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
Yeah. I think it's like the most basic thing that we have become so offended by.
Yeah.
It's just speech. Like I think I can say whatever, from the most cruel thing. I have the right to say it, regardless of what it is. Of course, we can question the morality of it and the ethics behind it, but I think that's another question. Just my right to say that thing,
Yeah.
it should not be taken away from me.
Yeah. Yeah, like you're right. And also, but at what point do your right
Impede on another
person?
Yeah.
Like, because understand speech, right? In the confine of speech, it shouldn't be limited, right? We shouldn't limit speech. But let's say, for example, we're in a big building, and someone say, "Shout fire, fire," and we all have to leave. And then there's someone who's like let's say there's someone who's injured on a leg, and because of that, they start running, panicking, and they fall down, right? And it causes massive injury, or it just caused massive injury, let's say. Would that person be in a right? And I mean, that's false information, but would that person be in a right for them to shout fire, even though it's free speech?
I mean, they would be, like, given that circumstance, they would be in the wrong based on the consequences that it lead to. But I think with free speech, we also have to understand that we have a sense of responsibility. And when we take away responsibility from individuals, then we incentivize them to say whatever they want and whatever, regardless of how cruel it is, and like take away the consequences that it could possibly lead to. And so, like, when we have that aspect of whatever you say, you're accountable for what you say. You're
Yeah.
accountable and you're responsible for what you say. I think on an individual level, when you have that understanding, it's good, because the extreme of free speech is I can say whatever I want. I can do whatever I want despite the morality or the ethics behind it, which is not necessarily right, because you can say something that is completely offensive and just inappropriate. And I think that there should be consequences for that. And the problem is with that aspect of even me saying that is like, how do we differentiate, like how do we find like what is hate speech and what isn't?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the it's kind of like the first thing you say in terms of like you being able to speak, right? It's kind of like conflicting with the idea of you being limited due to false information or hate speech, right? Because we don't really know that. So this comes to like the ultimate questions, which I feel like it's kind of like the biggest one is like, okay, how do we narrow down between whether, how do we find a unifying force that can unite us all in order for us to know which one is hate speech and which one is not? Like I feel like that's an existential question, but
Yeah.
I just maybe we can attempt to answer that.
Depends on the circumstance, I think.
Yeah, but I feel okay. Depending on the circumstances, let's say in general, like the most unifying thing, because I feel like in certain cultures there is
Yeah.
religion, certain cultures there's other aspect of it that play in terms of like being that one unifying forces that allow us to know, okay, this is the right and this is the wrong. I mean, like for example, United States is like the Constitution.
Yeah.
Right? The law is there, and that law is what unifies us all in terms of like if you cross this law or if you cross this boundary, you're gonna be punished.
I think for the United States, history is a big deal,
Yeah.
because a lot of times we identify what is hate speech and what is not based on history. And when you look at the history of African Americans or the history of the Jews, and a lot of the time that whatever I say will be analyzed on the basis of that history.
Yeah.
So I think it's difficult, like thinking outside of history, because we can't eliminate what already happened and just become oblivious to what happened while still promoting free speech. So it's a bit difficult to like,
kind of like, yeah, because and then it goes back
Yeah.
to my statement of like our memory, or I would say in a general sense where our histories, right, it's somewhat, it's not there for us to be bound in the past. It's there so that we can be able to learn and flourish so that our future can look brighter than our past.
I mean, the memory is still there, because
Yeah.
there's this saying where they say like history's there so we don't repeat it, something like that. And a lot of times we constantly go back to our history. Oh, this happened at this point of time. And so we try to look at the world through history, through historical things that happened. And whenever we do that, we constantly find whatever wrong happened in history, we'll also find it in today. And so it's hard to move on, but I also understand the idea of looking back and learning from your mistakes. And also because we are humans and we have like our conscience, where especially with the education system that constantly teaches us ideas of history as if they're happening today. So it makes it different. It makes it very difficult for me to navigate the world with this future perspective and this betterment type of perspective, when the only thing I know is this is what happened and this is what's going to continue to happen, because it's sort of like said so many times that it kind of becomes reality and perception. And like perception is reality. And so if my perception has been completely shaped on history, then I begin to see that in reality.
Because perception is reality in that sense, right? But the thing is this: let's say, for example, you're looking at histories.
Yeah.
In order for you to even look at history, you have to look through the lens of perception, right? You have to look through a worldview, right? So there's something that is already been groomed in you. Let's say your family or.
Isn't that worldview sort of established by history, though?
Well, okay, that's gonna be on a micro level, because, okay, so let's say, for example, like us, we grew up with our parents. Our parents taught us something, right? whatever they taught us maybe might be an impartation of the history that they had gone through or the history that they have learned, right? So whatever we have is what we're gonna look through, right? That's gonna be able to create our perception, right? And then we go to education, we go to school. Let's say school is teaching us something else, right? And then we're gonna look that history through the perception that we initially had from our house, right? I mean, I think that's the way it should be. I mean, in most cases, like when you're looking at it, I'm going to school, I'm using a perceptions based on my parents or based on my family, because that they impart those culture, they impart those worldview into me, and then in order for me to explain or understand the worldview that the school education is teaching me, I have to look through that lens.
Yeah, you look at the things that are displayed to you through the lenses of which you grew up with. Your perception.
Yeah. So okay. Yeah. So that's where my question was. Is like, okay. So you have your perception is your reality, and then if you say something about like if your perception is your reality, and your perception is primarily built upon the histories.
Yeah.
However, you are constantly experiencing reality.
Yeah.
The history might be altered by your current experience.
Isn't it the other way around, where your reality is sort of like altered by history? So it's like in the sense that history happened, and so it's in the past, but I'm finding things to identify in the present with like my history. Let's say, I don't want to touch on anything sensitive, but let's say just something devastating happened in the past, and you've moved on that, and you're living in a completely different world, different status, different class, everything, but you constantly find something to identify with that has a relation to your past.
Yeah.
And so I think that aspect of it is like you look at the world through the perception of what happened to you in the past, and you constantly look for those things.
Yeah. So it's a continuation of progress.
Yes, and
because you're going to constantly change and interpret life and reality different way based on experiences that you are constantly experiencing.
Yeah.
And then the constant change within your reality is gonna impact your perception within that moment.
Yeah.
Yet you still go back sometimes. Like most people do go back sometimes due to, especially if you go to a traumatic experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think our goal is we want to break free from the shackles of our past. Like we want to learn those lessons and leave whatever detrimental situation that we faced. I don't want to be in the same situation that I lived in a couple years ago. I don't want to kind of relive that. I don't want to relive my past trauma, but I want to learn and take those things that I've learned. And I think that is where you build up on history, not in the sense that you repeat it, but you learn those lessons. And because your perception is definitely going to be built from your past. And so you can't completely become oblivious of that, because those are the lessons that you will take into your future. But sort of just like building up on it, not in the sense of backsliding and going back to your history and recreating your history, but rather perfecting based on the lessons and the things that you learned and accumulated.
And then grow from it.
Yeah, elevate.
Which is our top, which is gonna be this is gonna be interesting.
Yeah, I think podcast. Yeah, we talk about history. How do we grow from that? How do we become better? How do we elevate? Yep. How would you define elevate?
Elevate? The simple definition is, growing into a higher position or higher status, right? I think elevate, right, it's first of all, it's being able to know where you are right now. Like you have to, in order for you to rise to a different dimension, you have to know your current dimension, right? And then once you become aware of your current dimension or your current level, then you can elevate to the next dimension, right? So we have past, present, and future. I'm just gonna use that terminology of past, present, and future.
Yeah.
in terms of like past is what happened before, and present is what's currently happening, and the future is our elevation.
Yeah.
Right. So you want to have. I see it in that sense of where my past can help me learn, and understanding my present, and my present can help me take me to the next level.
Yes. So the culmination of your past,
Yeah.
your present, and your future.
Yeah.
So you have lessons that you learned.
You
have a present to better and to live.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a future to look up to and aspire to be.
Yeah.
Yes, that's...
What would you say is your
I think
definition
you defined it. I mean, past, present, future, the combination of that, learning from our mistakes, being able to do what we can within the time that we have, the present, as well as longing and hoping for the future, but not hoping in the sense that we're just lazy and not doing anything.
Yeah.
But we're hoping and we're doing things
Yeah.
that will lead us to that future. That is elevation.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, that's what I was thinking, like the culmination of everything that's happened. And I think when we bring in guests or asking people questions, it's just going to be about just talking about their life, right?
Yeah.
Talking about their stories.
Yeah.
What they see.
Yeah. And elevation can happen in different ways. I think a lot of times when we look at these great men, it's the storyline is pretty much the same, where they tell us, all right, I started here, I was there, but it's not always a straight line.
Yeah.
It's not always a line that goes straight, but there's ups, there's downs, and there's certain things that you learn from and you elevate in ways that you just didn't think it would happen. And so, like, sometimes we have our own visions and our own plans of where we want to be, how fast we want to get there. We have our plan, but that's not how things always happen. And so knowing that I can elevate from whatever perspective and whatever point in my life I'm at, I can still elevate. If I have that higher aim and I'm able to be consistent, I'm able to work and better myself and still hope. Like, it's never too late to elevate, to become
a higher version of yourself.
Yes.
To elevate to a higher status. So I think that's going to be the theme of everything that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah.
What do you want to gain from this? Because I know what I want to gain from it. Mostly, like, for me, I would say the ability to articulate your thoughts. Very precise.
Precisely.
Yes.
Yes.
I feel like that's something that's going to be very tremendously beneficial in anyone's life.
Yeah.
It's your ability to articulate your thoughts precisely.
Yeah, that is important. And I think it's similar to what I want to learn. I think I want to master communication and relationships, because I think that is the bedrock of everything. Everywhere you go, there's communication, there's relationships, and if you can effectively communicate through active listening, and I know I'm saying it sounds like something simple, we always hear it, but when you can really master the art of communication, you can really touch people's lives.
Yes. You become a whole different person.
That's what I'm saying. And you get to touch on the nuances that we don't see. Like we talked about social media, it magnifies the good aspect of you or the bad aspect of you. But if you can have that communication and relationship in order to relate to people that you could never relate to, in order to talk to people that you have differing views, and just that free speech, but not in the sense that I'm talking to offend you, but I want understanding.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people just want you to hear them out.
Yeah.
Yeah, just hear me out. That's it.
Yeah. Like I just want you to hear me out.
Yeah, just conversations.
I have a friend who, like, literally when we talking, they would tell me their things they're going through, and then I would just hear them out, and then at the end of it, they'll be like, "Thank you, I appreciate it for just hearing me out." And the urges, which is interesting because I feel like we talked about this the other day, the urges comes when you feel like you want to say something.
Yeah.
Like if I'm talking or if someone is talking to you, you feel like you have to, like, follow up or something. Like you have to come up with a solution, or you have to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Because we get that a lot. And it's like whenever someone says something to you, you always want to have an answer.
Yeah.
You want to have a response. But that's not always the case. Sometimes I want you to genuinely sit there and listen to me. Like, regardless of whether you think you're adding value by not or not, by whether adding your input or sharing your thoughts, you don't need to do that. Just listen to me. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And I think that is the most important thing that we're kind of missing in society, where we want to listen to respond and not listening to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. We talked about this, but there's I think Jordan Peterson said that like speech, first of all, speech is the mechanism to which keep our society function. So in order for you to function properly in society, you have to have speech. You have to communicate. And what I want to learn is the ability to articulate my thoughts, right?
Yes.
And then also when it comes to communication, this is an idea that I got from him, was that if someone is saying something within the storyline, right? Let's say you have a storyline that you are telling me right now, and within the storyline there's something that I don't understand. Like, it's better for me to interrupt you and ask you and talk about that particular subject within that storyline before you continue. Because if you just continue and I'm still stuck upon that storyline that you told me, I won't be able to understand you, or I won't be able to concentrate to the next thing.
Yeah, it goes back to what we talked about AI, where it gives you the solution and not necessarily how do I actually solve it? How do I get here? And so that's important. The process is just as important as the end. And so, like, understanding that and being able to decipher that whenever you're having a conversation, especially when you're talking to someone and you don't understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, I have questions. I don't know what you're talking about. Please elaborate on your first point before you get to your second point, because I won't understand your second point. And we just don't pay as much attention as we think we do. We really don't. A lot of times we disassociate very quickly. And so when you're able to communicate that to someone, it allows you to even focus, because if you say something and I'm not on board and you go on to your second point, your third, and I'm still not on board, I bet you in my mind I'm somewhere else.
Yeah, and like, then you disappear. You go somewhere else.
I'm literally somewhere else. I'm probably not even listening to the conversation, so I can't really give you input on whatever you said because I didn't understand it.
So engaging yourself within that conversation, within that storyline, by putting yourself into it. Like, hey, listen, you're telling me a story, but for some reason you say something that I don't understand. Therefore, let's first explore that particular, subject.
Yeah.
And then before we go to the next one, because I won't understand.
Yeah, and a lot of times the simplicity, when we develop the simple things, we can understand the bigger things and more abstract things. And so what I learned from reading scripture, right, is I'll start with the verse. And I won't read the whole chapter because I would be confused. I'm like, okay, so what happened here? What happened there? There's too many questions. But I'll read one verse and I would develop on that, understand it, and be able to articulate it in a way that makes sense, in a way that is also theologically sound. And the more I explore that specific verse, it can lead me to the whole Bible. And I'll be able to understand everything else because I'm able to understand the simple and mundane thing.
Yeah, kind of like the complexity or the simplicity is within the complex.
Yes.
Like if you can understand the underlying simplicity of the matter, you'll be able to reach the most complex ideology that you can possibly think of.
Exactly.
So within that, you just build on that foundation of like, okay, let me start with the simplicity of it, build on that, elevate to the next level, and so I can ultimately reach the goal that I'm trying to that I'm aiming for.
Yeah. Also, like, elevate. That point is start with what you have.
Start with what you have.
Yeah. Yes. Don't worry about what you don't have.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that you have now,
start with that.
Start with that. Don't look at somebody else and say, well, I can't start until I get there. But no, whatever you have, like, I'm going to go biblical. The verse about the woman with the husband who was indebted, and her sons were supposed to go in slavery. And the prophet came to her and asked her, what do you have? And she said, I have nothing. But she had jars of oil that she could put oil in. And so, like, what do you have? You have something.
Yeah.
Start with what you have.
Yeah.
You cannot elevate with what you don't have, because all you'll keep looking at is, I don't have that. I can never get to that. How do you
Yeah.
get there? You start with
You
what you
start with
have.
what
You
you have,
build on what you have, and you learn to amplify and improve on what you have. That's how you elevate. That's how you become better, and that is how you improve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is true.
Like every great man, they start from scratch.
Yeah. And then they start with what they have.
Yeah,
like
you got to
said.
learn how to make bread from dough.
Where'd you get that?
I don't know. I just came up with it.
That's interesting. Gotta make. Wait, how did you say it again?
Got to learn how to make bread from dough. Flour.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. Gotta learn how to make bread.
Yeah. A
dough.
lot of times we have the resources. I mean, how was the world created? This world was void. We had trees, but look what we have now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we started with what we have.
Started from chaos.
Yeah, you have the vision. You have the vision. Now, how do you move with that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, they want something externally, right, to validate their initial, right? Like you want to initiate into something, but you're waiting for something outside to validate you.
To validate you.
initiate it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's how you should be.
That's
yeah.
not. You should be your own sort of like
Self-sufficient enough in order
Yeah.
for you to elevate.
Yeah, you're your own moderator.
Yeah.
So, like, you don't need anybody else. Like, you don't need others to validate you. There's something that I heard from Dr. Miles Monroe, and he was preaching about singleness and worth, and how a lot of times when we find our worth in other things, then when those things don't give us worth, then we become worthless as far as how we view ourselves.
Yeah.
And so when you get validation from others, it is that validation that you need in order to become yourself, really. And so whenever you don't get that, then you're worthless because you're not yourself anymore.
Yeah.
And so being able to be so confident within yourself, being able to understand what you have in yourself, build on that, amplify that, invest in that. That is the key, because you want everybody to validate you, but first you have to see the importance in what you have. Like, in order to sell your product, you have to see that it's valuable. Like,
Yeah.
why should you buy my product?
Why should you buy my product?
Yeah.
And then like they used to say like your product, in terms of like the product itself, right? The most important things about the product is marketing,
Marketing.
right? Because the way you market, because market distorts perception.
Yeah.
If you market your product, is how the time that you invest into marketing your product is how valuable you perceive your product to be.
Yeah.
Because people will see the marketing before they see the product.
Exactly.
And that's how it is. Like it's dynamical across all structure of
Yeah.
life.
And that's what determines your sales.
And that's what determines
Yeah.
yourself.
So if you don't see value within yourself, who do you expect to see value in?
Yep.
Like, no, I won't see that value. Like, you have to see that
have to see
first.
that value
And so
first.
you see great men who, they're not much better than you. It's just they know who they are. They know their worth. They know their value, and they value themselves as they are. And when I look at gold, I'm like, wow, that's gold. But gold in itself, it knows that it's gold. Like, you don't make it gold by saying that it's gold. It's gold regardless. So, yeah, you're in appreciation of it. That's it.
If it's dirty today, you clean it up. It's still gold.
It's still gold.
Yeah, it doesn't lose that value.
Yeah, it doesn't lose that value. So,
well, so I think that's kind of like gonna be an interesting topic. There's so many topics that I'm just thinking about as we go. It's like, man, it's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I'm excited. So it's gonna be. I think we're gonna have like different topic in terms of like business, marketing, life, philosophy, sales, and then also in terms of like just talking about things that elevate us,
Yeah, just
every aspect of it, every
anything.
aspect that elevate us, anything basically. So we're gonna have probably a lot of guests coming here.
Yeah.
I got a few people in mind that I think they're gonna be very, very worth it. But in terms of like everything else, I think this was pretty interesting.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
It's amazing.
It's gonna be an amazing season of
Yes.
Elevate.
Elevation.
Stay tuned.